What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to take a look at Skull and Bones here running on the Lenovo Legion Go. We'll look at 20 watts and 30 watts, 1200p and 800p. We'll mostly look at low settings when it comes to the benchmarks, but I am really running this game at more of a medium, so we'll take a look at those settings once we get through the initial benchmarks as well. So let's go ahead and jump into it here and take a look. So settings-wise, again, 1200p and 800p, starting off at 1200 here for these settings, borderless, and then graphics-wise, we're just on the low preset, but then I changed FSR2 to quality here, and then everything else is left alone. Motion blurs off, all that kind of stuff. And this is how we'll run through the benchmarks for 1200p and 800p for 20 watts and 30 watts. However, like I said, I am more playing the game at like a medium, so we'll take a look at that later on as well. All right, so let's get in here and take a look at some of these. So we've got 20 watts and 30 watts side by side here, 1200p low, FSR2 quality, 4 gigs of VRAM. Now, I experimented with 6 gigabytes of VRAM, and it really didn't make any difference or help me out. The game doesn't suck VRAM a lot at low and medium settings, and system RAM does, though, kind of want a little bit more. So 4 just wound up being a sweet spot. But side by side here, you can see, for the most part, 30 watts will gain you a little bit here and there, as you would expect, but it's not necessarily a huge jump depending on where you're at and what you're up to here in the world. It really does vary between being on ports or between out in battle or weather effects, and in the benchmark itself it's not always 100% consistent either. But 44 average FPS versus 47 average FPS for 20 and 30 watts there. Now let's go ahead and take a look at 800p, which is where I'm really running the game. Same settings, low, FSR2 quality, 4 gigs of VRAM, and this is really, for me, the better way. Even though 1200p FSR performance will get you close to 800p quality here, it just overall does run a bit better. We use even less VRAM this way, and it's pretty consistent. Now, 20 watts to 30 watts, again, there's only so much of a difference. When you're looking side by side here, it's almost identical when the benchmarks are really lined up. It just really depends. So 66 versus 68 average FPS there. I think for a lot of people, sticking with the 20 watt red ring performance mode on the go, probably going to be the way to go for this game. Now, 800p low TAA native, for those who just might have been curious about that performance, of course, is going to be lower than when we're using FSR quality, but I was curious to see how it would run here anyway, and about 10 FPS to 12 FPS lower this way than when we kick in either some more upscaling with TAA or go over to FSR2. So again, really depending on how you want to run the game, 56 average FPS just running it that way, and not quite as smooth as what I felt when I was playing with FSR. Now 1200p, this was the FSR2 performance I was talking about, and this will get you closer to that 800p we were taking a look at, whether you be at 20 watts or 30 watts. 57 average FPS there when you look at that versus the native TAA, but again, not really my way to go. I think the 800p at quality FSR is probably is good. I did do a 4 benchmark comparison here for 800p with low FSR2 quality and medium with low environment detail FSR2 quality, which is where we're going to land on for settings when we go take a look at real world performance and kind of how I've been playing the game. But you can see here at 20 watts and 30 watts the comparison between low at the top there and on the bottom when we come to the medium and low environment with the 20 and 30 watts. Really depending on what you want to pull out of the game, and especially if you're a doctor or not, will depend on what you really want to push here for things with Skull and Bones. But for me, pretty much kind of going with that 20 watt range, and the medium / low settings that I have here has been working really well. And our average FPS 66 to 68 there at the top, and 54 to 59 at the bottom for those settings at 20 and 30 watts. So maybe that'll give you a general idea where you want to head. Now, where I wound up with for actual settings, 800p here, and then I did kind of a customized medium. So I go medium, and then I put FSR back onto quality, and then we're going to do the environment to low. This helps my VRAM, but it also helps performance a good bit and doesn't really hurt the game. We get to keep medium everywhere else. I still ticked off depth of field and motion blur for myself here, and then left ambient occlusion. And this makes the game look much better here on medium, and I don't lose a whole lot of performance. Let's get into some real world here. Now, different ports and areas are going to run differently, and these are the areas that run the worst compared to like being out on the water, and we'll take a look at that. But 800p medium settings, low environment detail here, FSR2 quality at 20 watts, even in this area where things can get a little janky and rough. Pretty good. And we switch over to 30 watts here, you'll gain 5 FPS or so, maybe 10, depending on where you're at here, but you can get up into the 50s. It will dip back into the 40s here. So honestly, I just think 20 watts is a pretty good sweet spot here. I don't get enough of a bump all the time that I care about in this game at 30 to really eat the battery that much. Well, not battery, but if you were docked, 25 watts handheld is fine, but there's not enough of a gain from 20 to 25 in this game for me to worry about that. Now, 20 watts here out on the water. This is where performance is always a good bit better. It's just, I don't know, though it's just a lot easier to run than the land areas when you get into things, and even in battle and stuff like that. The game's really smooth, frame times are nice, it feels really good to play here on the Lenovo Legion Go, and the screen size when you're in handheld looks great on this game as well. Now you will notice the FPS start to dip as you get closer to ships, and it's kind of like rendering in all that detail. That's the only time you really get down to like port level or on land level FPS here, but even as it does that, the game feels great. Frame times are great, and I don't really have any complaints there. And I spent a lot of time going around to a few different areas, getting in a couple different battles, and just really seeing how the game felt as I went around and everything. And it felt really good. I never had any major hiccups. Surprisingly, no crashes. I know there have been some crashing issues with the game, but I haven't had any. This is my first experience with the game. I didn't play any betas or early accesses other than the few days early with the Ubisoft subscription. And yeah, I'm actually having a pretty good time with it. Huge fan of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and yeah, a lot of the way the combat and the ships and everything work do take me back to that. Now, what I like is the waves when you get out into some of these storms are a lot of fun to navigate through, and performance stays really good even if you get into some battles and stuff like that. But of course, if you get into some bigger waves and you kind of ramp over them at high speed and land, you will damage your ship, so be careful with that. But this is a lot of fun, especially if you get into some combat and you're trying to aim through the waves and stuff like that. And again, different port areas, land areas are all going to run different, but hey, from the 40s all the way up to the 70s on the go, even at 20 watts, 800p with these settings, mostly medium, I think it's pretty good performance for this game. And we know Ubisoft doesn't always optimize their games that great, but I felt like this one was pretty good for the most part, especially for the handhelds. But anyways, guys, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video. As always, we really appreciate it. Hopefully this gives you an idea of how you might want to run this on your go. All right, thanks a lot, and we'll see you in the next one.